if you don't know Fay, I'm sure you do. This is Fay, married to Greg. But just quickly, Fay, can you tell us where you were brought up? Were you brought up in Crowborough?
No. I was brought up in Yorkshire in a place just not far from Doncaster called Mexborough. It's the wickedest little village in England. That's its name. It's very proud of that. And it really was a horrible place to grow. And so my mum and dad were very young. My mum was 17 when she had my brother, and then 18 and a bit when she had me. And she was not at all maternal, didn't like kids really. My dad was a villain. He was a professional boxer and very violent. And so we were just a nuisance, really and truly. And he was a thief. He was such a violent man, and his answer to everything was violence. And he had dog fighting. I can remember having men come to our house and clearing all the furniture. Everything we had was second-hand and broken. And he would have dog fights in the lounge. We would have these dog fights. Men betting money, and so our house was just a mess.
So that sounds like a very different sort of childhood from a lot of our childhoods that maybe we've experienced.
Yes.
But actually, looking back, what were some of the hardest things about being brought in such a dysfunctional family, really?
Well, I think because we didn't know love. There was no love in our home. And as children, my mum went on to have 5 children, and we were very close as children. My dad was in and out of prison. We liked it when he went to prison because Mum was violent too, but not as violent as Dad. And when he came out of prison, when I was 8, he decided he'd move south and she wanted him to go straight and be a proper husband and have a home. We lived in squats with rats, and it was just a nightmare. It was awful. And we moved down south. We moved to Haywards Heath. Dad was working, building Crawley New Town, and Mum liked that because there was regular money. We lived in lodgings in Haywards Heath, and finally we got a little prefab. So we were in this prefab. My eldest brother, Phil, didn't come with us. For some reason, Mum didn't bring him. He stayed with my granny in Yorkshire. And we didn't know why. She didn't want it. She didn't want any of us, really. If she could have left all of us with Granny, she would. But we all, the rest of us, me and my 2 brothers, my sister wasn't born yet, and we moved to Haywards Heath, and Dad was still thieving and burgling. He was a burglar, and he would take me, because I was little, and poke me through the little, don't leave your little windows open. That's what I was pushed through, to open the big window and let him in. And so he was terrible, and I would be very pleased when he'd taken me, because he would be pleased with me, and he wouldn't hit me. And as we grew, the violence got worse with my brothers, my dad teaching them to box. I had to be the punch bag, and I would have to stand in the room, and my poor brothers had to punch me. And he would say, give her a left cross, an uppercut, all of this. And they would have to do it. If they didn't, he would hit them. And and I understood that. I knew that they had to. And they didn't want to. And my dad would beat them terribly. And he tried to drown my brother in a barrel once, full of water. He was such a hateful creature. And so we decided we were going to kill him. We'd kill him before he killed us. So he was a drunkard. He would go to the pub and come back absolutely legless. And my mum had to have his dinner on the table the minute he walked through that door. It had to be there. So I'm that old, we didn't have microwaves. So you had to have a pan of boiling water with his dinner on that pan with another plate on top. So I used to go down to his shed. He had a shed with all kind of potions, knotting and all sorts of things that he had in that shed. And so I used to mix bits into a little pot, and then I'd take it up and put it in his gravy. And we'd watch him eat all this and think, well, he'll be dead tomorrow. And my mum would say, help your dad upstairs to bed. So my brother and I would get hold of him, take him halfway up the stairs, and then just let him go. And he would fall back down, and we'd think he should be dead. And he would lay there, and he's fallen, Mum. She'd say, oh, we'll leave him. And we'd just throw a blanket on him and leave him there. He never did die, and I used to grind glass up in a pestle and mortar, put that in his potatoes, and with a bit of gravy. But he never died, but he did have terrible, terrible ulcers. And I feel that I was responsible for that.
Wow.
So, yeah. And then the last time he went to prison, when I got to 9, 10, I thought I had really long hair, and he used to wrap his hand in my hair and slam me up against a wall. And I've suffered from neck problems all my life, and I think that's where it all started. But anyway, I thought there's no other way he could hurt me, but then he started to come into my bedroom at night. And so there were other ways that he could hurt me. And that began, this sexual abuse. And that was terrible. And I told my mum, after a few months of this happening, I thought, I can't bear this. And so I told my mother that this was what he was doing. And she slapped me across the face and told me I was a lying little bitch and never to say that again. But then I must have been about 11 when I told her. I was just starting secondary school. And she was not wanting, she never did any housework. Our house was disgusting, but we didn't know any other. But she would say to me, right, you're not going to school today, you're going to do the washing. And I would say, oh, please, Mum, please let me go to school. Oh, well, if you go to school, I'm going to leave you at home with your dad tonight. I'm going out to bingo. And so she did know. She knew what was going on, and she blackmailed me with it. And when I was 12, my dad went to prison. And we thought, please don't have him back. He had started to he was beating her up. He was having affairs here, there, and everywhere. And he was abusing me, and he was really being hateful to my brothers. And he went to prison. And we begged her not to let him back. And she said she was going to write him a letter saying that she wouldn't have him back. So we were really pleased about that, thank goodness. And then this lady came to our house, a little old lady, and actually she was a JW. And my mum had a real soft spot for old ladies, not because she liked them, but because she robbed them. And because she would get them into the house and she would talk to them, and if they had something nice, she would tell them how nice it was and how she'd always wanted one of those, whatever it was. But anyway, this old lady came in, JW, but she was asking where Dad was, and Mum told her that he was in prison and she was going to finish the marriage. And I was earwigging from through the door, and this old lady said, well, you can't end your marriage. Marriage is for life, and it's before God. You can't do that. And we thought, me and my brother, tell her that, what silly cow to shut up. And what's she telling her that for? And anyway, Mum, this lady came every week and talked to me, Mum, and told her that. I said, in the end, Mum wrote to him and said, I've changed my mind, you can come back. In prison, my dad had agreed to kill a man on his release because he was now a free man. And but Christmas had happened. They'd come and asked if anybody wanted to go to chapel, and his roommate went, and my dad had apparently said, if I go into church, it will fall on me. I'm not coming. And so he stayed in his cell. And while he was in his cell, he heard the 23rd Psalm being sung. The Lord's my shepherd. He didn't know what it was, but this, and God just met him. And he finished up on his knees, sobbing before God, crying out to God to forgive him. And he'd never been to church, he'd never had anything to do with Christianity in any way, but God definitely met him in that prison cell. And so when his cellmate came back to the cell, and he said to him, "What was that song you were singing?" These were the words, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." And he said, "We never sang that. We never sang that." And so my dad said he must have heard angels singing. Anyway, he then had to go and tell these blokes that he couldn't kill this man. He knew something was happening to him, and he knew that God was speaking to him. He knew that. And so he then went to the bloke and said, "I can't kill this, I can't do it." Now, not that I knew at the time, but he expected repercussions from that, but nothing. Anyway, he came home, and he was totally transformed. He never touched me again, sexually, never. And he was just different. And we were all terrified because he had never touched any of us but to hurt us. And I remember him putting his arm around me. I can feel it now. It's a very odd feeling. He put his arm around me, and I was waiting for him to hurt me. And he was sort of doing this matey thing to sort of be pally. And he didn't quite know how to he didn't know what to do. And that was the beginning of our Christian walk. And we went to church. We went up to the Baptist church. He said, "Right, we're all going to church." We thought, he's gone completely mental. We didn't know what happened to him. So we trooped up to the Baptist church on the Sunday. We were sat we all squashed into one pew, and we all stunk of fags. Everybody smoked. You pop a polo in, and nobody knows. We just fumed. And so there we were in this it was the strict and particular Baptist chapel in Cookfield. And the pulpit was 12 foot above contradiction, you know. And underneath was this old man sat with his arms folded. And he was looking out at the congregation. We've learned afterwards that that's the lead elder, and he was just making sure nobody went to sleep. And but when he sang, all the veins in his neck, I thought he was going to burst. The preacher preached on the prodigal son. And he said, when the father saw the son afar off, he ran to meet him, arms outstretched. He welcomed him home. Here we are, sitting in this church, and my dad went, "Excuse me, I felt like that. That's what I feel that God's done to me." Wow. And everybody just looked at it. I thought, he's gone completely crackers. So that, and then he kept interjecting all the way through. And so the preacher in the end said, "Brother, I'll talk to you later." And so, but he just kept interjecting. "Oh yes, I know that. That's how I felt." We were all just dying. And anyway, that was the beginning. He was baptized. He just grew in God. My mother never grew in God. She just pretended to. I could see that this made a difference to our life. He wasn't beating us up. He was still slapping us, but he wasn't beating us up anymore. And we went to church one Sunday, and the preacher said that we are in the world and not of it. And we came home from church, and the rediffusion, you two are all too young, but you oldies will know, the rediffusion star came on the telly, and it said, "We bring the world into your home." Well, my dad went, "We can't have that in our house. Get it out. Burn it. We're not having the world in our house." So took that out. The radio went. Everything went. The only thing we had was the Bible. And he would tell us Bible stories in the evening. He would read Bible stories to us. So we loved it. We just loved being cared for in this way. We were all scared, still a bit nervous of him. But we could see that he was trying to love us and trying to do the right thing and trying to be godly. So here I was now, 14. My sister has been born, had this lovely baby that my mum had, and thought, "Oh, that's nice, Fay, you have her." And so she was in my bedroom. I raised her. She called me Mum. And do pray for her. She's got lung cancer at the moment, so please pray. She's going into hospital. Anyway, so that's my babby. So loved her. And so here we are. I'm 15. And I can see that being a Christian, all my dad kept saying to all of us, you just need to accept Jesus. You just need to ask him into your life and become a Christian. And I thought that would make him really happy. They'd really love me if I was a Christian. So I made up a testimony. I thought, I can make one of them up. I can say I've been saved, that Jesus loves me. I feel that he loves me. So I did. I said, yes, I'm a Christian. I love Jesus and I feel that he loves me. I had to stand in front of the church, at the Baptist church, and give a testimony. Made it all up and got baptised. And of course, it meant nothing to me. I wasn't really a Christian. Why didn't I do it then? Why didn't I just ask? But hey, we were all liars and thieves, so I just made this. And then I made everybody unhappy because I didn't want to go to church. I didn't read my Bible. I didn't want to do it. I just wanted to be loved. And I moved out of home at 15, went to live in a school for deaf children, and my dad got the job painting it. And so every window I went past, my dad was there going, why weren't you at church on Sunday? Are you reading your Bible?
Extraordinary.
So then I moved schools. I went to get a job at Great Walster School. My dad got a job painting it. And there he was, chasing me around. So I moved up to Durham, left there, moved up to Durham, and my little brother John, about a year later, my little brother John, he was massive. He wasn't little at all, he was huge. And I loved him dearly. He came up to Durham to tell me that it was real, that Jesus was real, and that he was a Christian, and that he had made such a difference in his life, that God had moved in his life and saved him, and he knew that he belonged to Jesus, and he wanted me to go to heaven, not to hell, because he said, that's where you go. If you don't love Jesus, Fay, you're going to hell. And I don't want you to. I love you. I want you to go to heaven. And he made me promise that I would go to church. Just once. And I said, John, being a Christian, I think Christians are boring old farts. Look what that lot of Cookfield. It's just boring. And it's boring being a Christian. He said, no, not when you're a real Christian. It's not. And I said, I'll sit on the fence. I'll just sit on the fence for a bit till I'm 80, and then I'll become a Christian when I've had a yippee-doo-dah life and done what I want to do. And he said, Fay, there is no fence. You're either saved or you're damned. I thought, that's a bit harsh. And anyway, he went home. And so the following Sunday, I was going out with Greg at the time, and I said, I want to go to church. Let's go to church. I promised John I would. So we went to this little Methodist church. And honestly, it was just a little room. It was like a shop. And it was this church. And there was just a row of little old ladies in black hats and black coats that looked like they'd been kept in a cupboard and brought out on Sunday. And the man got up and preached, and he preached on the fence. That there is no fence. You're either saved or you're damned. Well, I knew God was speaking to me. I knew he was speaking to me. And I said, Lord, please, I don't know what to do. And the plate, I was on the dole at the time. What do you call it? Unemployment benefit. And so we only had a few quid, and that was for our drink your poos. And so Greg's sitting next to me, and the plate came round, and I knew God was speaking, so I just emptied my purse. God, I know you're speaking. You can have all of me. You can have everything I have, because I know you're talking. And Greg thought I was looking for change. and he went, what are you doing? And I said, God's speaking to me. And he said, well, he's not speaking to me. and then the plate went, and Greg got up and walked out, and was very cross. And so I stayed, and I wanted somebody to pray with me. And I said to the youngest person in the room was the organist. And I said, please, will you pray? God's speaking to me. I need somebody to pray with me. And he obviously wasn't a Christian, because he just kept saying, why, where do you come from, pet? You don't come from around here. And so I thought, right, I'll go home. I'll pray myself. So I went home, went up into my bedroom, and I remembered the stories that my dad told me. And I remembered Job. that he was a faithful man of God, that so many things happened to him, but he was faithful. And I just thought that if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to commit to God, if God, you're speaking to me, I want to be faithful. I don't want to be the mess that I was at 15, pretending. I want it to be genuine and real. And I prayed, Lord Jesus, please forgive me. I've been such a ratbag, and I've got so many things to pour out, which I did, trying to kill my dad, trying to, all sorts of terrible things I'd done. Poured it all out. Make me like Job. Just please make me like Job. Well, nothing happened. And I thought, well, that's a bit disappointing. I felt I wanted to feel holy, and as if I've had a visitation or something wonderful had happened, but I felt completely nothing. And I thought, well, that's really weird. I don't know quite how prayer works then. So anyway, Greg had dropped off, and he finally came back, and I said, I've prayed this prayer, and I think God's speaking to me, and I want to be a Christian. And I'd got my Bible down, because I'd got this Bible that Dad had given to me when I was 15. And Greg just took it off me and threw it across the room. Said, it's a load of crap, Fay. You don't want to believe any of that.
Extraordinary.
I know.
Knowing him now,
yes.
It's extraordinary. but isn't it amazing, really, that actually in all the heartache and in all the pain, that the Lord used people in your family to bring you to faith.
Yeah.
And we've been thinking about the journey to joy, and actually, I'm sure your journey of faith since then has been, one of heartache as well, because, sin has consequences, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And actually, when bad things happen to us, we can't just move on.
No.
So I wonder whether, you can just briefly tell us, at the heart of the gospel is forgiveness.
Yeah.
That's the heart of the gospel. But actually, how were you able to forgive, as a Christian, your dad for all that had happened?
Well, once I'd had this experience of God loving me, the following day I had boils all down my arms, and I thought God was going to kill my family, and what's this all about then? I didn't understand what was happening, but God met me, and I felt that he loved me. I knew he'd forgiven me. So here I am now. I'm a Christian. I've become a Christian. Finished with Greg because he wasn't a Christian, was very anti. Life moved on, lots of things happened. My dad was giving his testimony here, there and everywhere, many years of living the Christian life. And then we found out that he had been abusing my niece. What he did to me, he did as a non-Christian. What he did to her, he did as a Christian. That was very, very hard. He went to prison, we went to the police, he went to prison. I was filled with hatred for him, absolute hatred, because he'd trampled on Jesus' blood, and that really hurt me deeply. And all my children turned their back on Christianity, because it's fake like he is, that's what they said. He went to prison, left, moved away, left our family broken, because everybody looked up to him as this godly man. But sin has a consequence, and if you don't deal with it, and I think what my dad did when he became Christian, he never said sorry to me, it was never mentioned. And I think like a dandelion, if you take the leaves off a dandelion, the root is still there, and it will come back, it will grow. And I think that's what my dad did with his sin of child abuse. And then my brother Phil, who was a psychopath, finished up in and out of prison and had this little girl that my dad had free. Could just go and abuse. And he did. And so, many years, 18 years later, we find this all out, terribleness. He goes to prison, we went to the police, he went to prison and moved away. I felt God. I had a dream that I had to go and see him. He'd moved up to Blackpool. Him and my mum had gone back to this hedonistic lifestyle. He was doing drugs, he was drinking, because I think he thought he was an apostate and that he had sinned so much that God couldn't forgive him. And I didn't want God to forgive him. I didn't. I wanted him to go to hell. And I just wanted him to suffer. He'd made everybody suffer, particularly Emily. And I wanted him to die in sin and rot in hell. That was my... Anyway, I went up. God gave me this dream, and I went up, and he was in hospital. He was dying. And I went into the ward, and there he was on his deathbed. And he opened his eyes, looked at me, and said, "Oh, Fay, forgive me." And Greg was with me, and I'd lost it in this ward. I mean, you know when you go completely loopy? I just went, "How dare you? How dare you? I'm not going to forgive you. There's not just me, there's a whole broken family. You have broken so many people. How can you possibly think that I could forgive you, you ratbag?" And I said, I'll put it right when I get out of here. I said, "You're not getting out of here, you're dying." Well, I'm not joking you. His colour went, and he looked like a sheet. He was just filled with fear. I could see it. And I was quite pleased about that. And he started to pray. He started praying. I wanted to put the pillow over his face. I wanted to stop him. "Don't you dare, don't you dare." And then I heard a voice say to me, "I will lose none that the Father has given me." And I felt like a blanket of peace was put over me. And I watched my dad go from the mouth of hell. And he prayed for ages. Greg and I stood and watched him pray. And I felt Jesus just wrap his arms around me. He said, "I've forgiven you so much." And I forgave him. I just forgave him. I thought, who am I? Who am I to, I'm not the judge. And I forgave him. And I kissed him. And I said, "I won't see you again, Dad, unless I see you in glory." We came home. I sobbed all the way home. And I think it was God just flushing everything out of me. I just sobbed on the train. We just cried, and Greg held me. And we got home, and there was a phone call to say that he'd gone. He'd died. And I was so thankful to God that I'd been able to go and do that. Because had I not, I'd be carrying that great burden of unforgiveness. It's such a destructive thing. So forgiveness is so healing. So that's...
Thank you, Fay. I mean, it's such a journey you've been on, and it, must be painful for you to go back there, to remember all that you had to go through. But it's so wonderful to see the Lord's hand, his handiwork in the detail, and actually the kindness of the Lord right at the end to give you that opportunity
wonderful.
For restoration, reconciliation, and forgiveness.
Yeah. And what Chris said this morning about that box, that everything comes back to God. Oh, that was such a beautiful story. And that he finds the nobodies. And I was a nobody, I am a nobody, but I became somebody when Jesus loved me. And he loves me, and he loves you. And I find it so encouraging that you don't have to be anything special, because Jesus makes you special.
Yeah. And actually, all through your life, the Lord was holding you, wasn't he? He was sustaining you. Yeah. He was keeping you. Yeah. And he granted you that wonderful moment with your dad right at the end. Yeah. And actually, that's what the Lord does for all of us, isn't it? In our journeys. Wonderful. Holds us fast. Yeah. We're going to sing a song now that reflects that wonderful truth. And actually, if anything has touched you from what Fay's said and shared, she'd be delighted to talk with you. She's written a book It's an extraordinary memoir of all the detail and all the heartache, but also the joy that was found when Jesus found you as well. Yeah. And do you have that book with you? Any copies?
Yes, I've got some books at the back. Yes, I have books at the back if you'd like to buy one.
Brilliant.